Dr. Barry Libin is here, and Dr. Barry has spanned interests from science to theater, writing novels, composing music. He's been a periodontist, and he went on to start several scientific research companies, but this has all led to this exciting and fun passion of his, which is writing and publishing novels. He has novels such as The Mystery of the Milton Manuscript. He has a play called The Triangle, but most importantly, what we're here to talk about today is The Red Mutation, The Plot to Destroy America, which is a geopolitical thriller that discloses the Chinese use of bioterror to achieve world domination. We have Dr. Jeffrey Moss of the NYPD, who believes there is a brilliant young scientist who is close to finding this antidote. It's an action-packed thrill ride. We'll find out all about the book and about Barry. So, Barry, glad to be speaking with you.
Pleasure, Robert. Thank you.
And thank you for being here. And so that's the jumping off point. There's you, your history, your book. But as far as straight from the source, what are you up to? What has you super excited lately?
Well, certainly my book that came out recently, The Red Mutation, is very exciting. The interesting thing is that I really started to write about this in the summer of 2019. Now, that was before COVID, but there was a plot. And what was the plot at that time? The plot was that a Chinese bioengineered virus from the Wuhan Institute in China, believe it or not, it went ahead and made this virus. The virus must have escaped, or they purposely did it, whatever. And it has caused over in the United States 1 million deaths, 8 million worldwide. And of course, everyone knows about COVID. And actually, I put the book away in January of 2020 because it was no longer fiction. It was now real. That's when we learned about COVID. And certainly COVID has changed everything in terms of how people live these days. So I went ahead and when I got a call from the publisher, I said, what book? I forgot about the book. They said, well, you know, COVID now is like, everyone thinks it's really like the flu. It's no longer the big killer that it was. And we've learned a lot more about it. So you can go ahead and get this published. So I went ahead and finished it, and The Red Mutation is out. And basically, of course, it is about a much more, shall we say, powerful virus than COVID. It's a mutation of COVID, and it cannot be stopped. But there is a scientist, a young scientist, who apparently has made great strides in being able to solve this problem. And he has disappeared. And now the question is, can the United States find him first? Or is China going to find him first? Because what they are missing is the antidote to this virus. And if they can stop this mutation, they can threaten the rest of the world. They just have to make a phone call to the United States and say, listen, we're going to let this virus out unless you do what we tell you to do. Your choice.
That is great. And I love the plot and I love the story. We always have to be careful about saying the COVID information, right? Because YouTube will add a placard, and if we're too aggressive, they'll take the whole thing down. But it's a great way to get the information out and also have it be fun and exciting. And because just learning like the facts and figures, that's okay. But like people, they tune out from that, right? And having a narrative that's exciting. I mean, how many virus movies and TV shows and books are there, right? It's a action packed. You have your Contagion, you have your Dennis Hoffman, your Outbreak. It's always a fun kind of plot with high stakes. And even like back during like the Saddam Hussein years, and they were talking about like, is he making like chemical weapons or a virus? You always hear about how like some of these other like crazy countries can kind of have this just incredible power, right? They can unleash this, and it's hard to stop. And if they have the antidote, that's a scary place to be. And so I love the like the right place, right time, right? You had this book, it was almost done. Then the COVID stuff was ramping up, and their publisher was like, "Hey, this is timely. Get it done, get it finished." And so, as far as the genesis of this idea, this all happens before COVID. So, like, what made you curious about the virus plot or possibilities? What even started your book as it began?
So um, after I stopped practicing periodontics clinically, I went into full time research and started a number of companies, one of which was a biotech company. And so, with that biotechnology background, I certainly knew about Wuhan. I certainly knew about viruses, and um, and realized the significance of what was happening. And then I let my mind go and say, well, what happened? Yes, what would happen if a virus actually escaped from Wuhan? Now, mind you, the Wuhan Institute in China is the most famous, and of the level 4 laboratories, which means that they can deal with the highest, worst, most pathogenic viruses that they're known to man, like Ebola, for example. So we all knew about Wuhan, but as China became more aggressive, uh, and then the military, I have taken over, and most of my material is factual, except for the story, which gives us the interest. They say that if you can write an interesting story, it's so much easier to learn. And so it's
Yes.
true that all of my books are filled with facts. And then some people don't like to have facts, but you can if you have an interesting method of transmitting it. And so that's really what this came from my biotech background and the possibility of a virus getting loose. And that is, I think, what happened.
And I like what you said there about how if you wrap something up in a story, then it becomes exciting and people get interested. And you think about, and throughout all of human history, when information was passed down back when we were living in huts and teepees, etc., what survived were stories, right? What's religion? Stories. And so it's a good lesson, because if you're trying to teach someone something or convince something of someone, well, if you just say, hey, here's the bullet points, like that only gets you so far. But if you say, hey, let me tell you a story, let me tell you how I felt and where I was struggling, and maybe you feel this too, that can be a lot more fun and that can be a lot more powerful. And so, as far as the way that this story developed, right? There's like the virus and there's the scientist, and then both sides are hunting him. Like, how did you come up with something compelling there? Did the plot just reveal itself to you? Did you play with it? Like, how did you develop that part?
Yeah. When you let your mind uh, go a little bit wild and creative, you can create anything. I like to think that creativity is an attitude. You walk into a room and you see that the tables really should be assembled in a very different way for the party. So that's an example of
Mhm.
using your creative mind. In this case, I simply made a story, which is what I did for my other books and which I'm now doing for my new book that I'm making. Um, and in fact, I was just notified that my play has been accepted and hopefully will be produced in New York, um, uh, called the St. Louis. And the same situation, the facts remain, and then we build a story around it so that people will be able to relate to it. And maybe sometimes you write a story that people can relate to personally, in terms of they have gone through the same kind of experience, but never looked at it in the same way. So that really is I think, the advantage of fiction as presenting uh, accurate material.
Perspective, right? It's like when someone shares with you their own personal situation, there's the angle where you can say, hey, I felt this, I can relate to that. And then there's also the fantastic element where you're like, well, there's part I can relate to and part where it's unique to you, and that's fresh and exciting to me. And so I definitely want to talk about the play, and I think you said earlier that there's like a movie coming out. I want to talk about that in a minute. But as far as the getting this book done, right? You had to be in a little bit of a rush to get it done on time. Did you struggle? Did you come up with writer's block? Did you stress out about the ending? Tell me about those writing difficulties in getting this finished.
Right. So I get up very early. I get up at 5 o'clock because I have a day job. I have in that case, a biotech company that I'm running. So from 5 to 9, I tune out and work on the book. I did not feel any stress. I don't have any writer's dryness or difficulty in terms of continuing my writing. I guess I've been fortunate about that. I hear about writer's block all the time, but I have not experienced it. And so the question then is, how do you write a good novel? And when they ask me that, I always say, with trepidation, I write for myself. I begin with an end, but I don't know how to get there. And as exciting as it may be for the reader to turn the pages to figure out where we're going, so it's exciting for me to write to figure out, well, okay, how do we get to where we're going? So both my readers and myself are in the same situation. We're both excited about turning that page and seeing where things are going. And so that's how I write a novel. It's like Michelangelo, how he, his statues entombed in a block of marble. And so little by little, the form takes place as he chips away to see what is there that's there until it becomes the book that you think that it should be. Now that's another problem. How should the book be? Can you write a perfect book? No, I learned that very quickly. So you do the best that you can, and that you hope that it's a message that's going to be of significance to the reader. The reader just doesn't want to. I don't like to read a book that you're just sitting on the beach and then throw it away after you're finished. I want them to think about, what have I written and what is the significance of that. And in many places in the book, you will see where this interpretation, in this case of China and Russia and China and U.S. relationships, I have come out with a discussion on that, and thus far, it is all coming. It is all coming true. So it's very, very interesting to see how this works out.
Yes, it is interesting and exciting about the future. And I love hearing about your process. And it seems like there's a lot of good tips and helpful advice in your answer here, that you say that you have a routine, right? You have this habit. You say, well, if I just gave myself these excuses and said, I've got this day job and I'll fit in the writing when I can, then that would really be to your detriment, wouldn't it? Because there's always things to do. There's always some emergency. And then it kind of, it's rougher on your brain, at least I think, if you go weeks without writing and then you have to force yourself and squeeze in the time, versus you say, hey, here's my schedule, here's when I have time to sit down and write. And I imagine there's got to be all kinds of subconscious work going on in between, but just that regularity of writing, like you hear about the Stephen King kind of like routine. He just says, hey, every day there's this word count, and I'll just make it a habit. I'll make it this consistent routine. That way it adds up to these big, thick books over time. And you also mentioned this idea about keeping that reader in mind, that you're sure you are writing like for yourself and what you find interesting, but you're saying, hey, like what kind of lives am I going to change? Who can I wake up? And I think that kind of helps keep you on your toes, doesn't it? It gives you kind of something that's interesting, and it isn't slow, and is just a lot of fun to read. And so, writing is tough, and getting something out there might take many weeks or months, and then when it comes out, then that's when it comes time to do their promotion. So I'm curious about what it has been like for you, as far as what the book has then led to, right? Like you're here talking about it on a podcast, you have the play. So tell me about like your marketing efforts. What are you doing to self promote and get the word out?
So I am not very good at the marketing. I have hired a group that is attempting to get this material out. But I do want to mention something that you said, which was very interesting. Um, Leaving what you're writing for whatever period of time and then coming back to it. I think that when you are writing fiction, means that you have to lose yourself in your character until you know them so well that um, you know what they're going to say. So when you're writing out what they're saying in terms of dialogue, you know them. You know what they're going to say because
Yeah.
you've already studied them for so long, and uh, so I think that fiction is a great way of telling the truth, in all honesty. And finally, to write a good novel, as you were mentioning, is really to practice the art of reading, because you write to read what you've written, and you rewrite and you rewrite and you rewrite as many times as needed until there's a suggestion that maybe you're almost where you are, but of course you never will want to be that way. I mean, I've written out this time maybe 20 different versions of the book until I'm finally pleased with what it should be. So, and you have to be able to appreciate how much time it takes to do that, and to appreciate when you have something that at least is close to being satisfactory for yourself, because my name is on it.
Right.
But I'm not a Shakespeare, and nor can I endeavor to be one.
This is great writing advice. So you have that excellent piece of advice you gave us about 10 minutes ago, where you said you start with the end and you get that figured out, because it seems like many authors, they just kind of stop. They don't consider that end. That ending is really important. Then you figure out the meandering path to get there, or the interesting path to get there. And then you say that you also kind of rewrite, and you have this kind of pride of ownership because your name is on it. And that's how my dad was. My dad would misspell every other word. He definitely wasn't a great writer, but he would edit, edit, edit. And then after 5 or 6 iterations, it would be what it should have been, as far as there's no such thing as perfect quality, as you said, but it's improving, improving. And then, hey, that ends up looking and being pretty good. And so as far as this play, what's that about and what's exciting there?
Well, actually, I just got a call from the producer yesterday, and we'll meet on Monday. Um, we sent out the script to them. This particular play, I already wrote the last play, which was called The Triangle. And that was based on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 in New York, where a fire broke out. They used to make shirtwaists at that time. And so they had cotton that they were using and other materials. And someone dropped, and they were on the 8th floor, 6th, 7th, and 8th floors. And someone dropped a cigarette, and the place went on fire completely fast. They couldn't get out of the elevator. These are all young girls who just came to America and got a job in very low paying situations. But as it turned out, to escape the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, many of them just jumped out of the 7th and 8th floors to the concrete and died there. It was the worst major fire that we ever had. And as a result, all of the laws that we now have, many of them come from that. This new play that we're discussing is called the St. Louis. That was the ship that left in 1937 from Nazi Germany, and it was mainly full of Jews that were supposed to go to Cuba. And from Cuba, they had already been given slots to come to the United States. And as it turned out, they weren't allowed to get in to even past the harbor in Havana. Apparently, the Nazis had a big march day before or something, and they put pressure on, regardless of how much money was being paid to them, they refused it. And so the ship had to turn around and go back. And they were ready to kill themselves. They didn't want to go back to Nazi Germany. And finally, at the end, 4 countries said, "Okay, we'll take them," and that's what happened. This follows a young girl who was in school, and we see how she was treated in school as the Nazis came in, and to the Jews, and then through her life, and finally ending up on October 7th with, she hears, of course, she's already so old, but she hears the sounds, the noise, the crying, the shooting, and the massacre that Hamas had committed. And so that basically is the story of the St. Louis, which is, I suppose, repeated all the time through history.
I've heard of both of these, but it was good to have a refresher. It was working parts of my brain that I hadn't used since high school, like, 25, 30 years ago. And these are important lessons. And it's really easy to forget history, and then we're doomed to repeat it if we don't learn these important lessons. And we can learn these lessons by having the history, the facts wrapped up in a story, because you wonder, how can all of these like acronym TV shows keep coming out, right? How do they have all the CSIs, the FBIs? Because they take them from the newspaper headlines, right? If they had to invent all these things from scratch, it maybe wouldn't be as good. It's like, why do all the Disney movies come out of Aesop's fables and the hero's journey? Because you have those fundamental building blocks and you can create something even better. And so I love hearing about what you've created here with the virus story, which we said is the Red Mutation, and with the triangle and with the St. Louis. You use that jumping off point and you say, well, here's something that happened. Here's some historical material. But if we just taught the history lesson, that's not exciting. But then we drop these fictional characters in there and we develop their personality and their history and their relationships, their interactions, their actions, the way the plot develops. And then there's that kind of magic, like sub personality aspect you mentioned of knowing these characters so well. Like, how they speak, what they would say. I think we've experienced that at some point, right? There's these characters in fiction, even as readers, that we kind of fall in love with, or we know what they'll do. We get a really good feeling of them. And it's very exciting. You're in a really great profession, it seems, and you're getting this fulfillment, getting this creativity figured out, and even getting the attention that you deserve, right? You have the book,
Well,
you have the play.
it sounds like your father has taught you how to be a very good writer.
Yes, and to appreciate the writing, right? And know when you have something that excites you and sounds good. And so what is up and coming for you? You have this play coming out, but just what has you excited about the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I'm working on a new book, and that is really a little different than everything I've done before. At first, I was just going to write it. They said I should write an autobiography. And when I started to write about starting early in my age and whatever, and I said, this is not for me. So I said, I'm going to write a novel. And indeed, put into it all the things that I've learned in life, all the lessons that I wish that I could repeat and have an opportunity to redo, and from when I was a boy. And so but again, like you said, people don't want to hear, you don't like to hear your father telling you what to do all the time. But if it's put in a story, as you said, you will listen to it and you will learn. And perhaps it can change the way you're thinking or how you act. So when you see a great film on television or in the theater, you actually can identify with those characters and maybe realize how they are responding in a certain way. And maybe that can help you respond in a different way than how you have been acting all of your life. It's very exciting. It is.
And it's therapy for many people, right? Including you as the author, the person writing it. It's therapeutic for you, but also for us reading it. And so, do you have any helpful advice for up and coming writers? You had a lot of amazing ideas here, right? You talk about making relatable characters, but is there anything in fiction, especially, that just like drives you crazy about the mistakes being made? And you can say, hey, new writers, don't do this, do that instead. Anything come to mind is about avoiding the mistakes?
You know, there are always going to be mistakes, and you have to go through, just like you and I, whatever we're doing, we learn from our mistakes, hopefully. And so, no, you have to do it, jump in the water, try it, see if you like it, keep going, don't stop, get out, jump again, get out, and jump again. And uh, you you'll find your that inner freedom that makes you feel, as you said, it's therapeutic, but you feel that inner freedom that you really are able to put down your thoughts in a way that makes it exciting and interesting for others to read.
So you're saying put in the time, put in the work, go through the experience of creating lots of bad writing at first, and then that way you get to mastery. That way you have developed the skill, so that way you can help yourself and you can also help others with the information that you're putting out there with your fiction, with your nonfiction. We said the book is The Red Mutation, The Plot to Destroy America by Dr. Barry Libin. That's Libin. And what are some next steps here, Dr. Barry? Some people say, go to my book, go to my LinkedIn, go to my website. If someone was really impressed with everything you said today, where should they go to find out more about you?
I guess they can go online, uh, put down my name. They'll be able to read about the book. They'll probably be sent over to someplace like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, where you can purchase the book, uh, and hopefully they will enjoy it. We've been very fortunate in that people are sending us notes that they are really enjoying the book, and I do speak uh, at various places. Uh, right now, I'm in Florida. I prefer not to go up to New York yet until it gets a little bit warmer. But you mentioned something. The great Dr. Johnson said two quotes that are of interest to you, which we can close on you if you want.
Yeah.
That great works are performed not by strength, but by perseverance. And he also said, what is written without effort is generally read without pleasure. So right, it takes time. It takes editing, like you had mentioned, uh, redoing. But that's life. No matter what you want to be, physician, a writer, or a biochemist, it's the same thing. Going over until finally you've hit what you think is the answer.
Beautiful. There is value in the stress, the struggle, the repetition to get to quality. And it's a great effort to be pursuing that in your writing, in your work, in your career, in your business. It's a wonderful message. And Dr. Barry said to Google search his name, that's first name Barry, last name Libin. And that helps train Google and that algorithm we hear about, right? If you do a search for someone's name and you end up clicking over to perhaps the Amazon book, Google says, aha, we'll give that Amazon book a higher ranking. So do that Google search, Barry Libin, Libin, and see where you end up, see what you want to check out, especially his book. We said that's The Red Mutation, The Plot to Destroy America. It's exciting. It's got everything for everybody. When the head of China's Hunan Institute of Virology bioengineers a COVID-like virus mutation that kills an entire village with a single nanoparticle, China's leaders believe they have created the perfect assassin, hidden, silent, and deadly, the most powerful weapon ever devised by man. That's more exciting than a lot of books, a lot of movies. You get sometimes tired of the the stuff that's just cranked out, the James Patterson, right? These household names, it's probably not even them writing it anymore. But you have these kind of exciting people that you wouldn't have otherwise come across except for in your internet adventures, such as Dr. Barry Libin, author of The Red Mutation, The Plot to Destroy America. Go on Amazon, do that Google search, check it out right now. And Dr. Barry, I got so many ideas. I had so much fun speaking with you. Thank you for taking the time.
Robert, my pleasure. Thank you again.
All right.